everyone who's here on time.
Quiet.
Chanie, do you want to get started? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I think I by accident asked you, Jennifer, to unmute. Sorry about that. Hi, Chanie. How are you?
Hi. How are you?
Are you ready to get started? Can I introduce you?
I'm ready whenever you are.
Fantastic. Can everyone hear Chanie? You can give me a thumbs up. Yeah? Okay. Awesome. All right.
Great.
So before we get started, I just want to introduce our very esteemed guest on our Zoom today. Chanie Apfelbaum, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, is a food blogger, recipe developer, and food photographer who shares her love of food, family, and tradition on her popular Instagram platform, Busy in Brooklyn, as well as on her blog. She's the author of the best-selling cookbook, Millennial Kosher, and is currently working on her second book to be released by Clarkson Potter in fall of 2022. And I think you're the first kosher cookbook to be released by that publisher. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We're really excited to have you here in LA. It's a treat. We don't normally get access to people like you, but this is the silver lining of COVID, I guess. And
Yes.
take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It absolutely is the silver lining of COVID, being able to travel to all different places without getting on an airplane. I used to do a lot of that right when my book came out, and it was exhausting. Although I do miss the energy, people's energy. I feed off people's energy, so talking to myself on a screen is not so easy. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to write it in the question box. If anything's important, you could stop me and I'll answer it. If it's something that we could wait for the end, then I'll take questions at the end. Happy to answer anything that you have. So Passover is coming, and it's actually one of the holidays that I find the hardest to develop recipes for, because I love to be creative. I love to use really different ethnic ingredients. For those of you that have my cookbook Millennial Kosher, I'm all about trying different types of cuisine, and I love sriracha and gochujang and all the fun ethnic foods and miso paste. I'm going in the Asian Korean direction while I mention all of those, but so really I grew up in a house where we had very strict Passover standards, and we didn't use any processed ingredients, and we only used things that could be peeled in case the peel came in contact with with chametz. So we have to peel everything. So we didn't use even like lettuce leaves or things like that. So when I made my own home, I became a little bit more lenient than my family. Also because I married into a Sephardic family, so definitely now using a little bit of the processed stuff, but try to keep things natural for the most part. So tonight we're going to be making pesto chicken with zucchini noodles, which I'm sure many of you have had if you've been on some kind of low carb diet. But we'll talk about different ways to make it: a roasted tomato sauce and a really delicious Nutella ganache tart. Esther, can you check on the coconut, please? We have a lot of things going in the oven right now. I have my coconut toasting, I have my hazelnuts toasting, I have my tomatoes roasting. So there's a lot of things. My daughter's just going to help out moving things in and out of the oven. And I'm actually going to check on the roasted tomatoes. Give me a second. Okay, they're looking great. So we are going to start. Oh, take it out. Quickly. Coconut goes from like toasted to burnt in a matter of seconds. Okay, that's great, but come here. So actually, and I'll tell you this tip now because you're all watching. So she just grabbed it out of the oven, and it's really nice and toasted. But if it continues to sit on the hot tray, because it's a real tray, it's going to continue to turn brown. So I'm going to go and transfer it to just another container. Esther, put it. Taking off that too. I smell them. And I smell my nuts and I smell my hazelnuts, and I always say, like, when I roast things, I go by the smell test. When I start to smell my nuts roasting in my kitchen, I know they're just about ready. And speaking of nuts, I have here some pistachios that I roasted, and we're going to use it to make our pesto now. Please transfer that to another tray so it doesn't burn, okay? Find something hard. Okay, so I have my pistachios here, and whenever I'm using nuts for a recipe, they always say, even if you buy toasted nuts in the store, when you toast, when the nuts are toasted, it brings out the flavor of the nut. It tastes fresher. Obviously, they're more crunchy, right? But when you buy them in the store and it says roasted and salted, it's been roasted in a factory 3 months ago, sat on a truck, sat on the supermarket shelf. So even if it does say roasted, I like to throw them in the oven, even for just 5 minutes, to warm them through, get the oils, the natural oils come out, and it tastes more like itself, and it tastes super fresh and delicious. So I always like to roast my nuts, even if they say roasted. In this case, I did buy raw nuts, raw pistachios. That's what my stores started all changing over into the Passover stuff. So that's what they had, raw pistachios. And I actually like to buy them raw because this way I control how much I like to roast them. And then with the salt content, if they're not salted, we're making a pesto, so I want to control how much salt there is in there. So it's not a bad idea to buy raw nuts, put them in a 350-degree oven just for about 10 minutes. Your house will start to smell like it. It'll be nice and toasty. You'll see a sheen on it because all the natural oils will come out. Okay, so I'm going to start by making it. We're going to start with putting some spinach in here. Now, obviously, when a lot of people think of pesto, they think of basil. And traditional pesto does use basil, but pesto is really like a nut and leaf mixture that can be made with all different types of nuts or leaves, or greens, I should say. You can make a kale pesto, you can make an arugula pesto. I like baby spinach. It comes already cleaned. It has a kosher symbol on it, so it's already been checked. And basil is usually very, very sandy. When you buy it in the winter, not as flavorful because it's not in season. It's really a summer herb. So baby spinach is really, one of the benefits of using baby spinach is that your pesto stays beautifully green, like even if it's in your fridge for 2 weeks. Whereas when you make basil pesto, if any of you have ever made it, you know that it starts to turn black in the fridge. Although if you do make that, cover it with a layer of oil, it does help. But it does tend to start turning black naturally. And with spinach pesto, it stays beautifully green. So we're gonna go ahead and add 3 cups of spinach to our food processor. And really on Pesach, I find that I use my food processor so much because when you're working with natural ingredients, not a lot of processed things, you're making things from scratch, you know, you really do need a good food processor. So this is a Cuisinart. I've had it for, I don't know, 18 years now. Never broke on me. I love it. Okay, 3 cups of baby spinach. Actually, do you mind? Yeah. Fixing my Zoom over here. Thank you. I can't see my screen, so make my thing bigger. I don't know how you do it. Maybe move slide. I think you just muted me. Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. Am I muted? No. No. Perfect. Okay, great. So we have our spinach in here. I'm going to go ahead and add 2/3 of a cup of my roasted pistachios. And I'm going to add a clove of garlic to that. And because pesto is a raw ingredient, it's not something you cook. It's not like a marinara sauce. You want to use good quality ingredients. So you don't want to use like frozen cubes here. You don't want to use frozen garlic or jarred garlic. You really want a nice fresh clove of garlic. Very important because it's a raw ingredient. Just bang it down with the blade of my knife and my peel slide right off. Stick that in there. We're gonna do some fresh squeezed lemon juice. Also, fresh lemon juice, of course, and I roll it just to get the juice flowing. If you like that lemony flavor in pesto, which I do, you can also add a little bit of the rind. Now, I'm gonna wait to put salt and pepper till the end, because if you look at the food processor, it seems like there's so much here, right? Because the spinach takes up like the whole food processor. So if you eyeball it in your mind's eye, you're like, there's so many leaves, I need more salt or I need more pepper. But once you grind it, you'll see it's not going to be much. So in general, whenever I'm seasoning greens, like if I'm sauteing kale, and you know, there's always that meme where they saute like spinach in a frying pan, and it's like this much spinach. And then you're left with like this much spinach, because once it wilts down, there's nothing left. So really you want to season it once it's wilted, because it's much easier to gauge the seasoning when you see how much you're going to be eating, because otherwise it seems like so much and really it's not. So that's why I add that out. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to start to blend that. Okay, just scrape down the sides. Okay, I want to show you just how buttery that already looks. No olive oil has been added, but the pistachios is so, it's a fatty nut and it has lots of natural fat in there, and it's already so buttery. This is what I find with pistachio pesto. It's like, doesn't even, if you're, when I'm making it even for dairy, I won't add any Parmesan because it's such a buttery nut. But I do want to show you actually a trick, which is not going to work when I'm pouring the olive oil in, but in general, I love this trick, especially if you're using your food processor one time after another. I do a lot of it like before a holiday. So you take a little bit of cling wrap, put it on top of your machine, and then you close it, and you just use it. I mean, you can rip it off. But basically, it keeps your whole lid, because you know when you use a food processor, everything kind of splashes into the lid and into all the crevices. And if you want to make you know, your next recipe, you're like cleaning everything, but this keeps the whole top of your food processor clean, which is amazing. I forgot to put it on, but in any case, I have to pour olive oil through it. Anyway, one time I did pour olive oil with the plastic on, so I've learned my lesson not to do that again. Okay, I'm just gonna give that one more scrape down. So beautiful green. Okay, at this point we can add salt and pepper. And now I'm gonna feed the olive oil through the tube. So with pesto, you know, I always like to start with less olive oil, and then, you know, I keep it in my fridge, a thicker version of pesto. And then if I'm making something, let's say I'm making a salad dressing and I want more olive oil, or maybe I'm making a sauce for pasta, I'll add more olive oil into, you know, part of the pesto that I'm using right then, instead of putting tons in at the beginning, because what if I want to use it as a spread, then I want it thicker. So depending on what I'm using it for, but you start with about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup. Also really important, the spinning motion of your food processor, if your olive oil is not fresh, can actually turn it bitter. If you ever make pesto and end up with a bitter pesto, maybe you had your olive oil in your pantry for like, you know, 2-3 months. If it's not like a fresh bottle of olive oil or an old bottle of olive oil, it will actually turn bitter when you process it. So if you're making pesto and your olive oil is old, get yourself a new bottle. Okay, and give another scrape down. Okay, great. Looks beautiful. Look at this beautiful green color. Nice and creamy. I'm going to give it a taste. Always, before you use it in a recipe, you want to taste it. Maybe it needs more salt, which in this case it does need a little pinch. A little bit more pepper. And I like it quite lemony, so I'm going to add a little bit more lemon. Can you come clean it, please? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and transfer this because we're gonna make our roasted tomato sauce in a minute. And this can keep in the fridge for a good 2 weeks. It'll last you the whole Passover if you want to make a big batch. And it's really so versatile. I mean, you can mix it into mayo. It's so good in chicken salad, mixed with mayo and some tomatoes and some arugula, like a nice chicken salad, which is really refreshing with all the holiday meals. So that's, mixed with tomato. You can mix it into zucchini noodles. If you're making a pasta, you can put it, spread it, make it like more of a sauce, spread it on veggies, put it on matzah if you put things on matzah on Pesach. Yeah, lots of great things. Great on chicken. Oh, so good on salmon, fish. And mix it into a tuna salad. I'll tell you, once you make it, you're gonna want to put it on everything. It's really that good. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so my daughter's gonna go ahead and wash that, and we'll move on to our chicken. Let me just show you this. I'm gonna have this right here. Okay, so this is our tomatoes. I use plum tomatoes. They're roasted. Obviously, they're not in season. I try to really use seasonal ingredients when I can. The tomatoes are in season in the summer, so if you want to make a roasted tomato sauce, you got to do it. So in general, whenever you roast something, it brings out its natural sweetness. And if you're roasting tomatoes, which are out of season right now, maybe not the sweetest, it's going to bring out more of the sweetness. Also, I buy the really plumpiest plumpest is probably the word, or maybe it's not a word, tomatoes that I can find in the store. You don't want to buy ones that are, normally you're looking for ones that are nice and firm for a salad, but in this case, you want to look for ones that are really nice and juicy. And then I just roast them in a 400-degree oven for about an hour. There's a whole head of garlic in there. So the way I smashed it, that's exactly what I did. And then 2 shallots that I roughly chopped and put on the tray. So we're gonna blend this, and it has quite a bit of olive oil. And what the olive oil is gonna do is gonna kind of emulsify together with all the tomato juices, and you're gonna have this amazing, beautiful sauce. So we'll see that in a second. It smells incredible already. But in general, when it comes to Passover, I feel like roasting is just one of those things, like I roast everything. Roasted fruits are absolutely delicious. Like a lot of people make compotes like over the fire, and which are so much heavier. What I do is like I'll roast apples in the oven for applesauce, and they'll be naturally sweeter when you roast something in the oven and you caramelize it and bring out the natural sugars. You don't need to add as much sugar to it or any sugar to it because it's naturally sweet. So I roast fruit. I roast all different types of vegetables, parsnips, kohlrabi. Kohlrabi makes a great low carb fry. Butternut squash, you name it, leeks, some olive oil, let it roast. And comfit is something that I love to make also, which uses more olive oil and kind of roasts for a longer time. And whatever you roast in the oven like that becomes buttery soft. So I'll do like garlic comfit, just garlic cloves, some fresh herbs, maybe little strips of lemon zest, lots of olive oil, roasted at 375 degrees uncovered for like 45 minutes. And they're like buttery nuggets, sweet as anything. Like you're not going to get that sharpness that you normally used to with garlic. It becomes completely sweet. So really, I'm going off on a tangent, but I love really giving lots of ideas that you can use for the whole holiday. Okay, I'm going to put on a glove here. Whichever peels will slide right off, I'm just going to take off because we want a nice smooth tomato sauce, and the peels are going to be papery and mess with the texture. But if you want to nibble on them later, they're delicious. But you just don't want them in your sauce. So this is also something you can do with peppers. And if you want to do a roasted pepper sauce instead of a roasted tomato sauce, this works great. Like red peppers, and you let it roast in the oven like this. And you could cover the pan with foil after, and it will kind of steam, and the peels will separate from the flesh, and you'll be able to peel it off just like I'm doing with the tomatoes. And you can do a roasted pepper sauce. That's also really delicious. Thank you. So normally I would first roast my roasted tomato sauce, put my plastic wrap on my food processor so it's clean, and then make my pesto after. But this was coming out of the oven while the pesto was being made, so I couldn't do it in that order. But in general, when I'm using my food processor before Shabbat and I'm making a bunch of things, I actually very careful about the order in which I make things. Because I'll first make my herb dips, and then I'll do my tahini after, because the food processor, once I use the tahini, the food processor is harder to clean because the tahini is more slimy or buttery or oily. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of these. So how easily those peeled. Now I'm just going to transfer it all to our food processor. It's quite hot. Let me get my tongs. Okay. Also, if you wanted mixed tomatoes and peppers, you could do a mix. That would also be interesting. See how nice and soft that is. And what happens is, because the tomatoes release so much liquid, your garlic and your shallots don't end up burning, because normally if you roasted them for an hour, they would really turn black. But there's so much liquid in the pan that the tomatoes let out that it kind of roasts and steams at the same time, so it does not get overcooked, which is great. It's still a little hot. Transfer all those juices. Look how many juices come out of here. Oops, I think I lost something here. Oh. I'll lose that. Okay, now we're just going to go ahead and blend. And so I gave that a little bit of time, so it's nice to puree. Look at that beautiful color. It smells incredible. I'm gonna give it a taste. It's amazing how something with so few ingredients tastes so good. It is a little bit acidic. That has to do with the fact that it's like I said, it's not tomato season, so they're not as sweet. I'm gonna add a pinch of sugar actually, and that's a great trick when you're buying out of season tomatoes. And if you don't want to use sugar, you want something more natural, you can use a little bit of honey. That works too. Or you can leave it out. It just tastes a little bit of that. I get that acidity. And if you want to do, add more salt and pepper, obviously when I roasted it, I added plenty and I don't think it needs any more. Let's just try again. Perfect now. Balanced. Exactly what I wanted. That little pinch of sugar really makes a difference. Okay. Our roasted tomato sauce is done. We're going to get our chicken in the oven now. And then we're going to make our zucchini noodles. So with the chicken, I opted to use hargio or dark meat chicken cutlets. And this comes from, it's basically a deboned thigh. And why I love these is, first of all, like I'm not a big fan of chicken breast roasted in the oven. It's just very lean, doesn't have a lot of fat, and really comes out very dry. If you like to, bake things, you're not big on frying, schnitzel, I find either needs to be grilled really quickly and marinated and grilled, or chicken breast, or made as schnitzel, fried in the oven. Now, when it comes to dark meat chicken, this is boneless thighs. This has a lot of natural fat, so it does not dry out in the oven. You can roast it, and you'll still have a really nice, moist piece of chicken. I'll make 4 pieces here. Okay. So this is what I use to make shawarma at home. I'll sprinkle this with shawarma spice from Perrick and olive oil, and then put it in the oven at like 425 degrees. Or even sometimes I'll broil it for like 6 minutes on each side, so it's nice and charred. And then once it's cooked, I stack them up on top of each other and slice it thinly, so it should look like shawarma, and it's amazing. It's like basically it's chicken shawarma, but it really a great dinner. My kids love it. So I really use these. There's a great olive chicken recipe in my cookbook that I use dark meat chicken cutlets for. There's a great recipe on my blog with sumac and date honey, which is actually kosher for Passover, so you can look that up. They're marinated and grilled, and they're absolutely amazing. So dark meat chicken cutlets won't dry out on you. You can grill them, you can broil them, you can roast them. Even if you leave them in the oven for a little bit too long, they'll still be nice and moist. So that's why I'm a big fan of these. And because they're boneless and they're off the bone, they cook much faster than, than making chicken legs on the bone. So they'll be ready at like 425 degrees. They'll be ready, I would say, in about 25 minutes, whereas on the bone would take you about an hour. So that's what's great about these super quick weeknight dinner. Okay, I'm gonna get another bowl here. Now, whenever you're working with raw chicken, I always like to take off whatever I'm using. Like if I made a pesto for it, because I don't want to forget and then double dip and then introduce the, raw chicken, obviously, to my pesto, and then I can't use it anymore. So it's important to remember to do that. Go ahead and spread some of that on here. And if you want to do this, if you want to feel like a chicken on the bone is a little bit nicer for a holiday meal, because this could be like a weeknight meal for Passover or during the year, you can do this with chicken on the bone as well. Bone in chicken. Just put a nice smear over there. If you really want to be fancy, another way I've done this, I make roulades. So they're like rolls, and I basically put it, flip it over, put the pesto on the inside, and then roll it tightly into a nice roll, and then I line them up all in one sheet tray right next to each other so they don't expand much, and then I serve them like pinwheels. But that's definitely more hotchki, as we call it, and a lot more labor intensive. And I feel like everyone wants something delicious and beautiful, but maybe not that hard to make. So this is definitely one of those things. Esther. Add a little bit more. Such a beautiful color. And this is amazing. Like if you want to do a whole side of salmon the same way, spread it over it. Okay. And another nice way to serve this, if you don't want to do like zoodles with tomatoes, with roasted tomato sauce, I'll buy tomatoes on the vine and just put it on the sheet tray with it, like little small ones, and roast it together. So nice. Really, really beautiful. And if you want to serve it as a holiday dinner like that, that's beautiful as well. Here I have kosher for Passover panko crumbs. So many companies are making them now. And if you don't want to use that, you can use matzah, ground up matzah meal, just to give it a little bit of crunch on top. I'll put that in a 400-degree oven for about 25 minutes. I'm going to just split with a little bit of olive oil. As you can see, this is straight on my baking sheet. And something that I really like to teach people is it's important to use real baking sheets, not disposable ones. I'm just giving an extra little sprinkle of salt and pepper, which I should have done before I put the pesto on onto the chicken itself. It's okay. So, real baking sheet. This retains heat. Like it's going to get really hot. It's almost like you're frying it. You're going to get amazing crispiness on your chicken. You'll see. Whereas a disposable baking sheet can't retain that heat. So you're not going to get the same. I really recommend it. And as you see, I didn't even put parchment paper. I do find that it gets in the way sometimes of a good caramelization when I'm roasting something. So whenever I'm doing something where I want really good caramelization, a good nice sear, a good nice crust, I don't put parchment paper. But when I toasted my coconut, I should say, I put parchment paper because I don't want the coconut in contact with the baking sheet. It will get too dark too quickly. So you kind of learn as you go, and it's really not so important. If you want to use parchment paper all the time, you can. People always say, how do you clean your baking sheets if you're always putting things directly on them? I'll show you my trick. I use these steel wool soap pads. You can get it in your kosher supermarket. They're basically little bowls of steel wool, but they have like a blue powder on them, and they clean the sheet trays amazing. That's it. Or you can buy barkeeper spray and sprinkle a little bit on, and then take some steel wool, plain steel wool. It also comes off. But I totally have tons of these, and I have them in every size. This is like a cookie sheet, or it's also it's the size of a cookie sheet, but it's called actually a half sheet. But this is a half sheet, which is the size of a cookie sheet. Then I have quarter sheets, which are half of this. I should have one. I just used one. Here. Pistachio. This is my quarter sheet. And then here I have 1/8 of a sheet. Okay, and if I want to, toast some sesame seeds, I use a small little one. If I want to maybe make 2 pieces of chicken, I'll do it on this one, or a small thing of roasted cauliflower that I don't need a whole baking sheet. And then, in my oven, I have a lot of things going all at once. Sometimes I'll nest this in here and be able to roast 2 things at a time. So it's great. You can buy them on Amazon and get yourself a bunch of them. Let's get this in the oven. So we're gonna move on to our zucchini noodles. Esther, can you put this in the fridge, please? Okay, so the reason that I make zucchini noodles, because I feel like everyone knows how to make them, and people have spiralizers, but I actually don't use a spiralizer. And the reason for that is I live in Brooklyn. I don't have a big house like some of you might have out in LA. I don't have room for so many gadgets, and it takes up a lot of space. It's hard to clean, and also when you make something with a spiralizer, especially zucchini noodles, it spiralizes really most of the whole entire vegetable. So that core of the zucchini, which is like 90% water or even more, remains in the zucchini noodles or the zoodles, and that's what makes your zucchini noodles really soggy and really watery. So what I like to use is something called a julienne peeler. And if you look at it, I'll come closer. It looks like a regular peeler, but if you look really close, you see the blade has a bunch of micro blades. Okay, so when you peel something, instead of getting 1 strip, you get a bunch of strips. So you're basically going to make zucchini, julienne zucchini or zucchini strips. So I'll show you how it's done. Hold it in one hand, and I just go ahead and I peel around the zucchini. And I just keep going. Sometimes I go around, sometimes I go in the same spot a couple of times. But basically, you want to go until you see the seeds through. Sometimes when it gets smaller, it helps to flip it over. Or hold your hand down on a surface to give you a little bit of something to hold on to. Okay. So now I just got zucchini noodles. And I love this tool. It doesn't take up any space. I use it to make I make a slaw with carrots, yellow squash and green squash. Whenever I make ramen, ramen noodles for dinner, my kids like, or even for my chicken soup, just gives it more finesse. Like instead of putting coins of carrots, like very close to serving time, I'll just make carrot strips like this and cut them into smaller pieces and then add it to the soup like that. It looks so nice. But mostly I really use it for zucchini noodles. And one of my favorite ways to make it is I'll saute it, add a little bit of marinara sauce and some shredded mozzarella, and I'll have it for a quick lunch. There was a time I was doing them every Saturday night, a different kind of zoodle, but then I ran out of ideas. But I've done it also with pesto, a little bit of pesto, and then I move it to the outside of the pan, and I fry egg in the middle, and then I let the runny egg all over everything. Oh my God, it's so good. I don't know. So I think there's a highlight on my Instagram with all those zoodle ideas that I did. Should get back into it. So that's 2 zucchinis, which is enough to feed, I would say, 2 people, because you'll see they're going to wilt down. So we're going to go ahead and cook this. As you see, this is the core where most of the liquid is. Okay, and then we don't use this. If you want to save it to put into some chicken soup, you can do that. You want to roast it in the oven and then just eat it. I make something called zucchini ganache instead of baba ganoush. So baba ganoush is with eggplant. I'll roast zucchinis and I'll mash it up like baba ganoush, mix it with trina. Sometimes I top it with ground beef crumbles. That's also a great recipe for Passover, by the way, if you're bored of the eggplant, because I know there's a lot of eggplant. So it wasn't my idea. I learned it from Ottolenghi, and he called, I don't know that he calls it zucchini ganache or zucchini ganache, I forgot what he called it, but he definitely, he actually blackens the whole, he grills the zucchini, and then he makes kind of a baba ganoush out of it. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm gonna move the camera a little bit closer so you guys can see how I saute this. How much time? 9:40. Okay. Okay, so when I make zucchini noodles, I really like to use a non-stick pan. In general, I'm not a fan of non-stick when it comes to cooking. I like stainless steel, or enamel cast iron, things that retain heat better. With non-stick pans, things are meant not to stick to it, so you don't end up getting as good of a sear. With zucchini noodles, we don't want to sear, we want it not to stick to the pan. I find that they cook well in a non-stick. So I think everyone should have one non-stick pan for eggs in general. So I have one for meat, one for dairy, and like I said, I use it for noodles. So basically, you want to heat it over a high heat. Let me get that up. Second. Okay, a little bit of olive oil. Well, not quite hot enough. You should have heard a sizzle. I didn't want to keep you waiting, but it's going to start in a minute. Now, I'm not going to add the salt now because what the salt does, it starts to draw out the moisture, and then you're left with liquidy zoodles, which nobody wants. So I add the salt at the very end. Okay, I hear it starting to sizzle. I'm going to give it a minute. And really, this is like flash stir fry, high heat, really quickly, and that's how quickly you do it. Esther, can you pass me one of those plates, please? So I know this zucchini will seem like a really simple thing, but there's actually a technique here to get it right. Sometimes I won't even saute them. I won't even cook them at all. If you mix them with pesto and you let it just kind of marinate and sit there, it will wilt down naturally and still have a little bit of a crunch. So really depending on what I'm making with it, sometimes I won't even cook them at all. Because if they're overcooked, they're really just mushy and soggy. Okay, if my pan was hot enough initially, I think it would be done now. Just need another like half a minute. And if I was making the cheesy zucchini noodles, at this point I would stir in the marinara sauce and a little bit of shredded cheese, and then just stir it together and serve it right away. Okay, this is it. This is the point that it's done. It's lightly wilted. It released some of its liquid. Now, if I was serving this now, I would go ahead and add the salt and pepper at this point. It's going to sit here for a bit because I need to wait for my chicken to be done. So I'm actually going to leave that there. Okay, we're going to move our camera back. Okay. Okay. Great. Okay, now while the chicken's cooking, we're gonna move on to our dessert. This is one of my favorite recipes. And I'm actually making this on my dairy side of my kitchen, so I'm using my dairy food processor. And by the way, speaking of good food processors, this one's very inexpensive. I would highly recommend it. It's made by Hamilton Beach. It's like $40 and it's very powerful. So if you want to get one for Passover, okay, let me grab my nuts and my coconut. Okay, so first things first, we're gonna make our crust. This is a gluten-free, kosher Passover crust. There's actually nothing in it besides toasted coconut. Like I showed you earlier, you can see how beautiful and crispy that is. Now, if I was never a fan of macaroons growing up because I don't like that chalky texture you get in your mouth when you bite into coconut. But when I started toasting the coconut, it's a whole nother experience. You don't get any of that chalkiness. You get that extra layer of caramelization because it's nice and toasted. And I fell in love with coconut like that. So go ahead and add that. Try not to do half of it like I just did. Okay, and now we're gonna add our dates. So I have here medjool dates, and mine were actually sitting in my cabinet for a bit, so they weren't as juicy. So what I did is I just poured a little bit of hot water on them, and I let it just sit in the water just to plump them up a bit. So if that ever happens to you, you can just do that, add a little bit of hot water. Also, really important, when you pit your dates, you gotta look inside them because often there's bugs inside, even if it's like, it's been packaged nicely and, even kosher certified, doesn't mean that there can't be natural occurring insects. So always check inside when you cut them open. Okay, so I love dates and I do so many different kind of things with them. If you have my cookbook, I have date peanut chews in my book, which the date is like caramel. And I also have a recipe for pecan pie bites. And on my blog, I have a recipe for lots of other bites that I make with, marzipan almond bites, lots of different versions, cookie dough, edible cookie dough made with dates. So for me, it's like such a treat. I always have like frozen ones in my freezer. They're delicious frozen if you want to try them. Sometimes I just split them open and stuff them with peanut butter or almond butter or tahini. And then I'll put them in the freezer or just a little bit of chocolate, a little bit of salt on top and eat them frozen. It's like the most delicious guilt-free dessert ever. So really so much you can do with them. Very, very versatile ingredient. Okay, we're almost there. So what happens is as the coconut blends down, it almost becomes like a flour. So it kind of, together with the dates, it forms a kind of a dough, which works really well. We are going to use our trick now because we are going to make our homemade Nutella after. So we're going to keep the top of this clean. Well, I use the food processor a lot. I wasn't kidding. This one burst through. I forgot the way this machine works. There's the hole goes all the way to the top, your lid. So we just made a hole through it. Doesn't work with this food. Only works with that food processor. Okay. Oh well, we tried. Okay. So you basically want to do it until when you press it together, it holds together. Okay. Smells like macaroons from the coconut. I have here a tart pan that I lined with a sheet of parchment paper. And the reason I line it is because otherwise the dough, because it's sticky, is going to stick to your pan and you're not going to be able to pick it out. So it's important to line it. Sir, can you come clean this machine, please? Can you come clean this? Okay. Now we're just going to press this into the bottom of the tart pan to form a crust. Pretty clean, just a little bit. Okay, I'm pushing it up the sides to create a border. Sometimes, depending on the coconut that you're using, when you toast the coconut, it brings out its natural oils. The same way as when you toast nuts, it brings out the oils after it's sweet and scary. The same way as when you toast nuts, it brings out the oils from the nuts. So the same thing can happen with the coconut. So if your dough feels a little greasy from the oils of the coconut, you can take a paper towel and just kind of wipe it down. This happens not to be. Sometimes it is, depending on the coconut that I buy. Okay, here we go. Press in, that is our crust. Great. Okay, we're gonna go quickly make, I'm just gonna wash my hands real quick. Does it have water in it? We'll wipe it. Okay. Move over, I'm gonna move this. Okay, now you want to take, by the way, this was sitting underneath my cutting board because it keeps it from moving around. So it's a great trick. Just put a little rag underneath your cutting board when you're using it. And then when you take it off, you can clean with it. Okay. If you want to use like a dish towel, these are called flour sack towels, like you sell them at Walmart. They're great. We're going to go ahead and I have my hazelnuts that I toasted. And we need to take the skins off. Okay, so we're just going to put it in a dish towel and you're just going to kind of rub it. Okay, and when you roast it in the oven, what happens is the peels kind of separate and you'll see they start to crack around the nut. And then when you rub it together, you can see all the peels start coming off. It doesn't have to be perfect. Some of them can have some of the peels on, but it's definitely better if you can kind of skin them. I know we're making this for Passover, so I don't know if you even have it there, but Costco sometimes sells skinned hazelnuts that have already been skinned. If you can find those, that are great, but I don't think you can find it for Passover. So I definitely wanted to show this technique. Depending on the nut that you're doing, sometimes you can leave the skins on. If you're making your own almond butter, because this is what we're doing, we're essentially now making our own hazelnut butter. We're taking hazelnuts, we're putting in the food processor, or making butter out of it. Yeah, so if you sometimes buy almond butter, if you ever look at the bottle, sometimes it's a darker color. They've used the peels. But with hazelnuts, they kind of have a thick peel, so that's why they do need to be peeled. But like I said, I leave it on some of them and it's still okay. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so for the most part, now try to bring the camera in closer so you can see. Okay, so you have lots of the skins coming off on the bottom here. You kind of rub it. See, it just kind of comes right off. So we're gonna go ahead. If anyone out there is watching, it doesn't have food processing, they're like, how am I gonna make any of these dishes? Because they all use the food processor. I'm sure you learned something. Buy them. Esther, where's the lid? Oh, it's here. Okay. So now, if I had more time, I would maybe skin them a little bit better. But I basically kind of put them in my hand, shake them out a little bit from some of the skins, and transfer it here to my food processor. This process is how you make any kind of nut butter. And like I said, you don't always have to skin them. But I make my own gingerbread pecan butter. I toast it. I don't skin the pecans. And I put in like gingerbread type of spices like cloves and nutmeg and ginger and cinnamon and a little bit of maple syrup. Oh my God, it is so incredible. I make a cinnamon walnut butter for Passover, walnuts, which also are not skinned. I made my own almond butter. Any kind of nut could really be made into a nut butter. And really, when you buy it in the store, so expensive, and it's really easy to do yourself. In fact, the reason I started making nut butter is my son is anaphylactic to peanuts. And my doctor told me, his allergist said that whatever nuts he's not allergic to, I should feed him so he doesn't develop an allergy to them. So I started just making my own nut butters at home. And some of these mic is on, if you don't mind turning it off. There's a lot of background noise. Thank you. Here.
Anya, I mean, it didn't help with last year. Anya, nem segített, hogy...
iPhone Arthur, would you be able to mute, please?
Okay, we're almost there. Of course, if you can find already shelled hazelnuts, it will do the job a lot easier. Okay, we're done with this. Let's get that ended. Sorry. When it comes to making, if you want to turn it, I'll mute it while it's going. Actually, you're gonna come mute it when I turn it on. When it comes to making nut butter, it takes time, and you'll see that the nuts keep kind of changing form. And in the beginning, they're going to be piecey, and then they're going to be mealy, then they'll look liquidy, but they'll get thick again. You really have to let it go until it's smooth and creamy. Sometimes, depending on the food processor, it could take up to 5 minutes. Okay, well, I'm going to mute it so you don't have to listen to the sound, but you can watch me and I'll show you the different stages because we're going to scrape it down. Okay, now you can see that is nut butter. You see how liquidy that is? That's what you want. And that didn't take long at all. Like I said, this is a very powerful machine. So the machine is nice and warm because it's been working. Normally, I would melt my chocolate chips over a double boiler, but because the machine is warm from working so hard, I could just add it to the machine and let it keep going, and it will actually melt my chocolate chips. So you want good quality chocolate. I actually really love this brand. I'll show you. It's called California Gourmet. It's sold on Amazon, or I don't know if they sell it in LA, so I'm going to say Amazon. So it's kosher for Passover. I actually developed the recipe for the back of the bag. That's my recipe there. And it is, you know, how you know a product is good is when it has very few ingredients and you can recognize those ingredients. This has cane sugar, unsweetened chocolate, and cocoa butter. 3 ingredients, and it tastes so good. 48% cacao. So you're gonna add 8 ounces. Is it 8 ounce bag? I believe so. Yeah, 8 ounces of good quality chocolate chips. And we want to add a cup of coconut milk. So we're making essentially a hazelnut, a Nutella ganache tart. Ganache is usually by weight equal amounts of chocolate and heavy cream. Coconut milk makes a really good replacement. So we're going to use coconut milk here. I have canned coconut milk. I just want to talk about this for a second. If you look at this, this is like coconut cream. Usually you have to refrigerate coconut milk for it to separate in the refrigerator. But I mean, I guess maybe it's a little bit cold in my house. So, I mean, sometimes we're just sitting in your cabinet and it naturally separates. But if you wanted to make a healthy whipped cream, because I'm, you know, like the whipped topping, if for in a kosher home and you want something that's pareve, not milk and not meat, a lot of us resort to like Rich's Whip. But coconut cream is actually could be whipped up like whipped cream. It will literally whip up. You take beaters and it will whip up like whipped cream. But you have to separate the coconut cream, which is this, from the coconut water, which is settles on the bottom of the can. So usually you refrigerate it overnight in order to do this. Mine happens to be separated right now, and I'll show you the coconut water when I get to the bottom. So I need 1 cup of coconut milk, which you can use if it wasn't separated. You could just use the regular full fat coconut milk. In this case, it's separated, so I'm just going to use the cream and it will make it nice, even thicker. Okay, 1 cup, add that. Oh, this smells so good from the hazelnuts. I can't even tell you. Okay, this is the can. If you look at the bottom, you'll see the coconut. Actually, I'll pour it for you to see. Just watch, okay? You see that? That's coconut water. And that was cream kind of mixed in. So that's the difference between coconut cream and coconut water. Okay, so we added that, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. I don't even measure, I kind of just eyeball it. And a little pinch of sea salt. You always want to add a little bit of salt to your sweets. It brings out the flavor, it balances it out, it brings out the sweetness. Actually, salt brings out the sweetness. So I like definitely a nice pinch of salt in my sweets. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna blend that up until it's nice and creamy. I want to use again. Yes. Okay, we are done. You can see that I tasted it in the middle just to see how I like the salt content. We're gonna go ahead and spread that out into our, look at that, beautiful ganache, Nutella ganache. It's incredible. Now, if you don't want to make the tart, you can just make even just homemade Nutella by making the hazelnut butter and then adding the chocolate chips and then leave out the coconut. The coconut is what makes it into ganache. So you could just make your own homemade Nutella, put it on matzah. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I make it every single year for Passover. I have a jar. We eat it with strawberries, we eat it with bananas, we put it on yogurt. It's amazing. Okay, so here we go. Here's our tart. We put it in the fridge to set. And if you want, you can add raspberries, you can add strawberries on top. You can serve it with coconut whipped cream, as I just mentioned how to make. And it's really an amazing Passover dessert. If you want to sprinkle it with some chopped hazelnuts on top, you can do that. Kind of tells people what's inside, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and transfer that. And then when you're ready to serve it, you just lift the parchment paper out and then put it on the table to serve. And this is definitely served out of the fridge, because you don't want the crust to get too soft because it's harder to cut. So you definitely want to serve it cold. Okay, we are going to move on and just plate up our chicken. It came out of the oven. I want to show it to you. This is our chicken. Look at that beautiful caramelization. You can see all the little crispy bits on the pan. So I'm going to take some of our roasted tomato sauce, stick it on the bottom of the plate. We'll take some noodles and twist it into a little nest. Okay. I'm going to cut just one of our pieces of chicken here. Oh, it smells so incredible. Put that.
Are you done yet?
No. For the top here. I lost one. Okay, lastly, I'm just going to add some fresh basil. So, to show you how to do a little chiffonade, it's called. Give me a second. My plate. Okay. Got some fresh basil. So this technique is called chiffonade. And basically, you can do this with any kind of leaf. You're turning it into a ribbon, like little ribbons, thin ribbons. So you basically just stack them up. Stack them on top of each other. And then you're just gonna roll it, okay? Start from one side and roll it up. Just like that. You're gonna take a knife knife. And you're gonna slice it into just thin. And slices. These beautiful ribbons. And we're just gonna sprinkle that over the top of the dish. And that is our roasted tomato sauce with zucchini noodles and pesto chicken. Even put a little bit of chopped pistachio on top. I always like to put a little bit of what's inside on the plate so people know what they're about to eat. So that about wraps up our Passover demo. I hope you learned something and happy to take some questions if you have about anything that I made. Otherwise, you can email me busyinbrooklyn@gmail.com. You can check me out on Instagram @busyinbrooklyn or on my blog busyinbrooklyn.com. Check out my cookbook, Millennial Kosher. I'll just give it a quick shout out here. Available on Amazon or your local Judaica store. It was a pleasure being with you all, and happy Passover. Any questions? Anyone?
What temperature did you cook the chicken, the pargiot?
400 degrees.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else?
There's a question, what food processor did you use?
So my meat one is made by Cuisinart. My dairy one is made by Hamilton Beach. You can look it up on Amazon. It's about $45 or something. You'll see it there, Hamilton Beach. Anyone else?
Chanie?
Yeah.
Sorry, so we have a nut allergy in our family to
Okay.
pistachios. Chanie has let us put pistachios. What else could we use instead of pistachios for?
So you can use sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, any kind of seed. If you can't have any nuts, or can you have some nuts?
No, we can have some nuts, just not pistachios.
Oh, okay. So, you can do almonds, you can do cashews. Cashews would be delicious. And then if anyone out there is nut free, you could use a seed of some sort.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Any other questions before we wrap up?
Let's see the cover of my.
What was the name of the coconut milk that whipped up into a cream?
So you're just looking for full fat coconut. That's
Full
it.
fat
They sell
coconut.
coconut. Yes.
Okay.
I use the Roland brand. But there's lots out there. Some whip up better than others. I do find that Roland is pretty good. So
And
Is that
roll it
your-
with kosher for Passover.
I'm not sure actually. I don't know. I don't think it is. But you have to check. I mean, the stores are not fully turned over, so I only use what I had in my cabinet at home. But I think Lieber's sells. They might even sell a coconut cream where they have already separated it. So I would say just check your local grocery that sells the Passover ingredients.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Chanie, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I can't believe how much ground we covered.
Yes.
in just a little over an hour. And thank you for all the helpful tips throughout. That was super fun and very informative.
My pleasure.
So have a wonderful Pesach, everyone. Thank you for joining and supporting the sisterhood. And God willing, we see you soon, maybe one day in person. Bye.
Everyone, thanks for joining. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Good night.